Very good. All right, so want to welcome everyone to our Greater Stanislaus County Faith Leaders meeting. And just real simply, what this meeting is all about is just hearing about the needs in our community and trying to address those needs, trying to have practical ways that we can help our community out. Let's hear what the needs are. Let's do something about it. The other component is hearing about from each other, from each other's congregations or organizations, and how each of us are learning what we're learning and how we're helping situations as well. I think we can all learn from each other in this. So it's not just going to be a monologue presentations. It's going to be about hearing from each other. That's really the hope in all this. As we go around, when you make a comment, if you can just say your name and what organization or congregation you are from. We're not going to do that up front. We'll do that as we go along here. I want to put in the chat area, I'm going to put in a little bit here the other faith leader gatherings that I know about taking place. I think there's like 4 of them that are taking place in our community throughout the month. And so I want you all to be aware of it and to be involved as if you'd like. I know there's wonderful people that are facilitating each of these gatherings that take place. One more thing is this past month in a number of our cities in our area here, not all, but a number of them did a citywide volunteer day in their city. And the reports that I have heard back has just been incredible. We did it right. We did it with all the safety protocol in place. We all wore masks. We all had distance. We were outside. We make sure our hands were clean. I mean, all the things that were asked, I just saw as a whole were abided by. And the response that I received from different city leaders and participants was this was such a positive thing for our community. There's been so much negative news going on here. This was something that we all needed. We needed something positive. We needed something that we could do and do it right and do it with safety in place. But there were a lot of things, there's a lot of things that can be done, it must be done. There's so much neglect that's happened these last 6 months. And so just be encouraged. There's wonderful people that live in our area that are doing some wonderful things. So if you get discouraged and you're hearing a lot of the negative stuff, I mean, I'm telling you, there's tons and tons of positive stuff too that I know is going to continue. So with that, I want to turn it over to Deb Thrasher. Deb, if you can just give a little bit more of your background, your name. We'll get some new people on the call here, and just share a little update about the COVID-19 in our area, where it's at now, who knows where it might be going, but I'll let you share any updates you have, and then we'll open up for some questions.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Deborah Thrasher. I'm with Stanislaus County Health Services Agency, which also includes our public health department. My background is I worked with Office of Emergency Services with the county for many years. I can't even remember, 13 years, I think. And then have been with Health Services Agency since 2016. I have, because of my emergency management background, I was immediately assigned to our Department Operations Center and then Emergency Operations Center for COVID. And I've been assigned there ever since March. So so that's really how I come to all of you. I haven't done my day job since February. It's been a while. So I'm glad Jeff brought up really good news first, because I am not necessarily the bearer of glad tidings, unfortunately. Last month when I spoke with this group, we did have good news. Our numbers were going down. We were looking, I think, at getting in the red criteria, or else we had just made it there. Unfortunately, it's a different story this time. It is highly likely that for the first time in a number of weeks, that when the state releases their numbers today, that Stanislaus County will be back in the purple criteria for case rate. Now, we won't move to the purple criteria this week, even if our numbers are there, because the state does not move counties up or down in the criteria until they've met that criteria for 2 weeks. So we can't go lower and we can't go higher until the numbers are consistent for 2 weeks. However, it is very likely that our case rates will be in the most restrictive criteria of purple when the state releases its information today. What does that mean? Well, right this week, it doesn't mean a lot. We're still in the red tier, even though we'll have, it's likely we'll have the purple criteria, but next week it can mean quite a bit. So normally on Tuesdays, that's because of the election, the state pushed back the date that they release the numbers till Wednesday, but every Tuesday is normally when the state updates the criteria and the tiers for the county. For all the counties. And it looks like that the 10th, if our numbers don't improve, there is the potential that we could be back in that purple tier as of November 10th. So for our faith community, that goes back to the closure of churches, and really for our overall community, all the restrictions that we had in September, with some exceptions for schools. And if you want me to go into that, if you have any questions about schools, I can answer those. How does the tier impact? But I'm not going to go into that unless you're interested. So how do we not go there, or at least if we go there, we don't stay there long? And unfortunately, or fortunately, we know what to do. I spoke with our epidemiologists before this meeting with the EOC, and I said, what's the message you would want me to share? And really some of the key messages are, one of the best ways to prevent the spread is when you are reported, you receive that positive test, you receive the call from public health, is to communicate and answer that call. Really what public health is doing, and those contact tracers, is we want people to quarantine so they don't continue to spread. But as you know, there's a lot of, there's distrust of government. There's distrust of a lot of things right now. And so when our teams are reaching out to the community, a lot of, not a lot, but enough that we don't hear, and they're not telling us where they've been. Therefore, the spread continues because people don't know that they've been exposed. They don't know what to do when they've been exposed. And let me share with you, because I get these questions quite frequently from schools, from businesses, from childcare. Okay, we've had an exposure. This is the circumstance. Every circumstance is unique. How it impacts you is unique. And so to not be communicating with public health and getting that expert advice, people overreact and underreact. And and trust me, there's also a lot of overreaction where they're taking extreme measures that they don't need to, because they're not getting the good advice. So that would be that from the epidemiologist, the message they want to share out there with the community is, if you're exposed, if you're positive, communicate with us who those potential folks are that you have been around, so that we can make sure that they stay quarantined and aren't continuing to spreading the disease unknowingly that they've been exposed. That's key. And then it just goes back to everything you've been hearing: wear your face coverings, maintain a 6 foot of social distancing, wash your hands, and avoid mixing as much as possible. So that's my overall downer message of the day, and I'm really sorry to bring it.
All right, let's open up for some questions here. I'm sure there's some questions about, congregations opening and schools opening, and maybe there's other things as well. So I'll open it up for everyone.
Hey, Deb, this is Jim Applegate. Thanks so much for your work and what you're doing. My question would be about the difference between schools and churches, because I think one of the questions I'm going to get asked as a faith leader is, if schools can be open, why can't churches be open? And, you know, it's always constantly a comparison game. So I mean, I just want you to know I'm on your side with this, because I want to stop the spread of this and understand that. So I want to be as helpful as possible, but I'd love to know how to explain to my congregation the tier structure and what is the difference between schools and churches.
Okay, realizing I'm not Dr. V or a public health nurse, I'm going to give you what I understand of that. I'm going to start with the tier structure and just explain what is an open school, because that is very confusing. So schools could open in the purple tier if they got a waiver for TK through 6. And now that we're in the red tier, since we've been in the red tier for 2 weeks, all schools could open TK through 12. But if they are not open prior to us going to the purple tier, they can't open. So say we have and it's school by school, not district. So you could have one school in your district that's open and one that never opened under red tier, and that school can't open. So it's school by school. One of the reasons that my understanding is that to get schools open is because of the public health risk to children with them being closed. There's unfortunately abuse that doesn't get reported. I mean, if you talk to our partners at CSA, the reports for abuse have been down. There's other childhood diseases and issues that are exacerbated when children are not in school. So there's a public health give and take for children not being in school. The other thing is children, and I'm going to mess this up, are not as likely to get or spread the disease as adults. At some point in their teenage years, they become more likely, and they're the same as adults. But especially your younger children in your K through 6, they're just not as receptive to this disease. The concern for really schools opening and where we're seeing it just with the school openings that we've had is really among staff is we adults tend to spread it and are more susceptible to it than children. Not that children can't get it and can't get sick, just that they're less likely. So I think it's just that the overall need to get these children back in school and the need to and that they're less likely to be spreaders and come down with the virus. Jim, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
All right, anyone else? So basically, Deb, I think for when it comes to congregations, I think what you're saying, moving to the purple tier, that we're going to be asking, our county's going to be asking our congregations not to meet in person until we go back to the red tier again. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a state requirement for all of California, that if you're in the purple tier, then so our businesses, some of our businesses will have to close again. There won't be indoor restaurants. You know, just think of September. If the business was not open in September, if there were additional restrictions in September, that's really what those restrictions go back to. And so, you know, and it's really goes with our mixing, you know, that we want to go back. Our levels have increased. I think when I was talking to the epidemiologists, they were saying that to stay in the red, we needed under 40 cases per day reported. We're now seeing in the 50 plus range of cases per day. And then, you know, the other concern is our hospitals, our COVID positives in hospitals. That's one of the things that I monitor as well. It's just been going up recently. And the other concern is with our ICUs. I don't know if you look at the dashboard for Stanislaus County, but even though COVID has gone down and it's not in our ICUs are always in that red category because they're so full. And so we're always on that cusp of capacity in our local ICUs. So there's just a lot of concerning issues, and hopefully we can just pull it back and we're wrong and we're going to stay in red, and this is not an issue, but I just wanted to share this with this group so that you're aware of the concerns and can also share with your communities and let them know that all of our behaviors make a difference. What we do and don't do for this disease makes a difference of what stays open and what stays closed, and it's really in our hands. So yeah, I'm just a bummer today. I'm sorry. I wanted to be uplifting and it's not there.
Well, I think what's so hard for us to hear this for congregations as well as businesses is, okay, now the weather's changing. So meeting outdoors, doing outdoor, I don't know how this affects outdoor dining or outdoor services. I think that would still be permissible. Is that correct? But it's look at the forecast coming this week. It's getting to be cold and raining's going to be coming. And that's what's just the morale, everything it's just devastating,
The holidays. That's why I'm glad you have Dr. Mora next, because someone needs to pull in an uplifting message after me.
Yeah. I agree. Don't take that personally. But
I just want to thank you, Deb, because I feel like you're the bearer of bad news and the messenger, and I know you're doing the best you can. I'm just going to say it's a big struggle because I understand, as was said about kids, that things are happening and abuse and all of that. And also on the church side, there is a deep emotional toll, mental health toll, and spiritual toll on our church families as well, being so isolated. So it's hard because you weigh that, and we see on this side, I mean, we've had so many referrals for counseling and just people really escalating in mental health crisis from our church that it's like, where does that weigh in? I don't know. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, this has been a challenging year, period.
Hey, Jim had a question I see here in the chat area. And Jim, can you just share that? Maybe not verbatim, but kind of what you're asking here, how we can help, how we can get involved.
Yeah, I don't want to dominate the question time. So if somebody else has questions, then go for it. But Deb, we're really, I don't know if excited is the word for it, but we're really glad to be able to help the marginalized and the vulnerable in our community. And I'm wondering who those people are and how the city and the county can get us in touch with those people so we can reach out to them. So I love what Christine just said about, offering counseling and helping people in those situations. But I'm wondering if there's even a lot of immigrant families that don't have status in the country, like, is there a way that we can help them and come alongside them? So just, we're even thinking like a lot of the older people in our fellowship who are going to be alone at Christmas, alone at Thanksgiving, how we can reach out to them. But even outside of our faith sector community, how we can reach out. And then the second, for the churches that choose to disobey the order, what are the implications of that for the city or the county? Because I know that's going to be another question we get as well as faith area leaders is the sheriff or the police, or, is there going to be like a Velvet Creamery type thing that's going to happen? I hope that all churches will abide by it just because of the health implications. But if they don't, what's the line of thinking from the county and the city?
Okay, first question first. Jim, you're challenging me this morning. Anyways, first question. I don't know if many of you know Erica Inacio. She's with our Chief Executive Office, and she's been assigned in the Emergency Operations Center to work with our community-based organizations. And there's been several grants that have been given. And I'm sorry I don't have the specific details on that. That's not an area I've been following, but she's been the focus of reaching out really to those populations and working with the community-based organizations who work with populations that are hard to reach, underserved, and can really answer those questions. So what I can do is I'll look it up afterwards. I'll give you Erica's email, Jim, and for everyone else, I'll put it in the chat. But she has really been the lead for outreach in that area, and can let you know specifically what's been done, and also and with who and what populations we've really been able to target and do some good work with, and probably where we're missing, we still need to do better, or we haven't even come close to hitting the mark yet. So I will include Erica's email in the chat when it's not my turn to talk anymore. Regarding for churches that choose to disobey the order. You know, the direction that we've received from the Board of Supervisors has been very clear. So realizing that public health is a county department. The public health officer has authority that's been delegated to her and to that position for all 9 cities, and includes the unincorporated county. However, specific to enforcement of those actions, the county has really wanted us to educate. So I'm the one that if there's a complaint that comes into our call line regarding churches, it comes to me, and I'm the one who makes any outreach. For those of you that know me well, it's really an opportunity to educate, let folks know what's going on. If there are continued complaints, then we usually send that to the law enforcement branch. And if it's a church that's in the unincorporated area, they'll probably get a call from the sheriff's department, or else it'll go out to the city that church is in, and it's up to that city's leadership how they want to handle that. I can say that specific to businesses, because this has really been more of a case in businesses, that when we really look at public health action is if there are outbreaks in a business and the business is not following the advice and the guidance of what's being told to them from public health. And that is after a thorough education process. We usually will have our public health nurses out there. We will have a lot of opportunities for education and changing practices. When that happens, I don't think that one was ordered, but I know it's been close a couple times. A public health order can be issued specific to that entity to either close or desist. That is an extreme circumstance. That is not somewhere we want to go. That would really mean that there is complete no cooperation, and that there is such a public health concern there that the only way we can stop it, because of the level of the spread of the disease, is to issue a public health order. That's not where we want to go, and I honestly don't think that's where we would go with most of the faith-based organizations in our community. I think we would use education, but really between that education and those extremes, it's up to that local that local jurisdiction what they want to do. So it may be different for each one of your cities where you're at. The city of Modesto may handle it differently than the city of Turlock, than the city of Oakdale, than the county. So that's really the process that I'm aware of. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that is incredibly helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, Jim, you had another question, like what can our community do to help? And I just want to remind everyone, if you know someone in need of help, and if you're not able to do it, if your congregation isn't able to meet that need, we have a phone number, 211. If you call 211, we've got people who are there who can triage whatever the need is and to connect with those who can help with that need. You can also do it online, 211.org, and type in, you know, your city, zip code. This is an incredible resource that United Way, you know, oversees, you know, for our community. If you or you know people who want to help, who want to volunteer, again, we've talked about this for the last 6-7 months, loveourneighbors.org. Go to loveourneighbors.org. There's ways. We need people to deliver food to seniors, people to reach out, be a neighborhood champion in their neighborhood, check on their neighbors. There's all kinds of ways to get involved in our community on that website. So those, if you need help, 211. If you want to help, loveourneighbors.org. And we got great people that are organizing teams and people to meet the needs as they come up, which these coming weeks and months, you know, quite likely it might increase. I mean, Deb, that's kind of the thought all along. Wintertime, this is kind of going the direction, unfortunately, that we thought it might go, correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So we got a long winter ahead of us, but who knows, you know, but we're gonna do what we can do. Well, maybe this is a good time transition to getting some help here. And Dr. Mora, there's a lot of pressure on you right now. Lots of pressure on you.
Thanks,
to come
Jeff.
through, to save this meeting, give us some hope here. Go ahead, Dr. Mora, go ahead and introduce yourself, your role, what you do, and just give us an update, you know, regarding mental health in our community.
Okay, and while I'm doing that, I have a slide deck. If I'll introduce myself, and if you have to give me permission to share, then you can do that. Don't be afraid, folks. There's a lot of information in the slides. It's really to trigger me to talk about certain things, but I'm not going to go through it line by line or anything like that. You can do so, and if you have any questions about it or whatever, you can, you know, reach me either now during this meeting or afterwards. But I'm Dr. Bernardo Mora. I'm the medical director for Stanislaus County Behavioral Health Recovery Services. So also probably relevant to this group, and with my apologies to Mike, who's probably heard a little bit of this before in a separate meeting. I have some role in terms of our own ministry at the littlest church in Modesto, which is not Big Valley Grace or Grace Lutheran or Crossroads Grace, but is Grace Church Modesto, which is on Standiford, not too far from Jeff's church. So I kind of know both sides against the middle, and sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't, because then I get confused as to who I am and what I'm doing. Anyway, let me go ahead and see if I can overcome the technology and do this and this and slideshow. Okay, so well, that's interesting how that started there. So hope for those struggling with mental health. I dare say I probably would have changed this to hope for those struggling, because at least my bias when I read this title is, oh, only people with mental health issues are struggling now. And I dare say that that's not the case. Someone alluded earlier to the fact that you all are getting more calls, and I probably don't need to tell you all, because we've just been talking about it for part of the last half hour, how very disrupted all of our lives have been in the last 6 months. I only joke, it's only a half of a joke. I can barely remember anything that happened before March of 2020 myself. So, you know, there's been such a reset in terms of our support systems, of course, including churches and congregations, but schools and jobs and changes therein. And some of the changes may not be, you know, we may be able to grow out of them, and we hopefully will, but it's still one of those, you know, and of course we're talking about the pandemic, you know, once in a lifetime, every 100 years occurrence. I've stopped using the word extraordinary to describe the pandemic. That was my word of the day if we were having this talk in the spring. Such an extraordinary time we're living in. Frankly, I just call it a pain in the neck time now, because, and not that my inconvenience is worth anything, but for all the things that I think we should do in behavioral health, and what I think folks should do outside of, you know, in their regular lives and real lives, you know, the pandemic, not just the precautions, but just all the overall things, you know, just sort of get in the way. So why are we even talking about this? This is from a headline. It's a little bit dated in pandemic terms now, but it's still relevant. It's about 2 months ago from August. Some of you probably saw the headline, which, as newspaper headlines go, they try to grab your attention. So it's a little more sensational in Modesto B in terms of summarizing a CDC study. The point about me bringing up this study, and some of the details are there, and I'm not going to read through the details, but down at the bottom, what I would consider are limitations of using this as what I call hard news. I mean, certainly, you know, there are effects that all of the disruptions that I've alluded to have on people. There is no doubt about that. So I am not downplaying that at all. But these are the kind of studies that are surveys, you know, while put out by the CDC, you know, depending on how you feel about it, they're reputable or they're not. But, you know, they're responsible for the public health in many ways in our nation. This is still, from a scientific point of view, what I would call a survey. So it's a point in time, and it wasn't even using the same questions in the spring of 2020 as compared to when they did similar surveys, but not exactly the same, a year ago and 6 months ago and things like that. Nevertheless, it does make some potentially useful observations, but it is still a survey. So it's a point in time for a particular population in time. The folks here don't have strict diagnoses. They allude to, you know, increases in symptoms of anxiety and depression, and I can be on board with that. That's fine. But, you know, it's a point in time, and so what it doesn't mean, though, even though I'll show another slide that may suggest it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a complete downward, or maybe I should do it this way, downward trend, you know, that we're going to, you know, plunge into some morass of pandemic behavioral health, although some have tried to predict that and tried to see that. This is an interesting slide for me, and it comes from the state of Washington. And I show it mainly to kind of show where we supposedly are. So on the bottom axis is a timeline, and you see there's a black circle there with Washington, this is from the state of Washington, as of last week, where they believe that they are, in terms of the, you know, the stages of reactions and behavioral health symptoms in disasters in general. And you can see we're well past having the impact, the immediate impact of the actual disaster, which in this case is the pandemic. And the sort of, you know, surge of, I'll say, excitement and energy that happens, you know, people responding to disasters, people rallying around, which has happened for the first 6 months. But now we're in this sort of middle phase where, just, you know, colloquially speaking, you know, people are either getting tired of it, they're getting, you know, what we'd call in other circumstances battle fatigue, which I've heard that term being used now. Compassion fatigue, I'm sure, is a term that you all have heard in your ministries and your settings. And so it's easy to become disillusioned because it is hard to see that there will be any end to this. Even the small reminder about, oh, we might go from red to purple. Oh no, it's disaster again. Well, it's not total disaster. It certainly is inconvenient, and I will acknowledge that to no end. But just to give you a glimpse of, in the big picture, when populations and societies go through disasters, what tends to happen. So a year from now, if you look on the graph, there are improvements and there are ups and downs, just like you might expect there would be. But there is hope, and there will be a way forward. It is just hard to know, because I dare say, even in this august group, none of us know the future, certainly not the earthly future. And so that's the uncertainty is really of not knowing is really what the hardest part is about all this. This information comes from actually a county leadership summit that was held about the same time, about 2 months ago, to try to address sort of where we were as a county and where things are going. And my point in using this slide is really, what can we do when stress levels are high? Now, stress is not always a bad thing. So there's one of my correctives, because you can grow from stress. It is not necessarily that stress automatically leads to anxiety and depression, but it can make us go outside of our comfort zones. It certainly does. And then we can develop some what's called resilience, or some bounce back ability, to be able to handle not just the current stress, but future stresses. And the things that hopefully our congregations and our faith-based communities can certainly do is to try to maintain that positive outlook and to give hope, to give possibilities, even new possibilities that we would never have considered a year ago, to be able to bounce back from things that happen that are pandemic related or not pandemic related. It's been scientifically proven. I don't have the reference in front of me, but if people are able to have some joy and happiness, and I give you all permission, to spread this message to your congregations and to anyone else you come into. You are allowed to be happy during a pandemic. You are allowed to have joy and enjoy things. I thank the Lord for my little 4-year-old son, who probably, I hope, doesn't know anything, even what COVID means. But on the times when he's not in that whiny and cryy phase, but he says, I love you, mommy, and I love you, daddy. I mean, those are the precious moments that we should all live for and get hope and happiness from. But joy and happiness do also lead to increased immunity from illness. And I'm just a poor country psychiatrist, so I'll have to let other people speak on the medical reasons for that. But there is a link between the psyche, the soul, from brains, and your immune system. There is such a thing as psychoneuroimmunology. Not that I'm an expert at it, but it is a good reason to count it all joy, and even in the face of trials. And all this leads to increased agility and well-being as well. From that lovely scientific source, the Wall Street Journal, of all places, they decided to publish an article about finding hope when everything feels hopeless. I think the strength of you all is that last one, that belief in something larger than yourself. Because if all I had was belief in myself, we'd all be in trouble, frankly. There's only so much that any one man, one woman, one person can do. But someone has to come in and be of help, maybe even 3 people. I'm not going to go there. But these are some of the factors behind, where hope comes from, in terms of where people have a sense of attachment, trust, and connection to another, being able to be capable, and having people validate your capability. It's not necessarily, egotistical to think that, but it helps if you're appreciated at least once in a while. And then the survival part, which goes back to the resilience, that you're not trapped in a bad situation, that you always have options, and that you can still hold positive thoughts even when there's negative stuff going on around. So the same article, how do you increase hope? And again, I think for us, it's probably spreading that hope, and spreading it far and wide. Trying to talk as positively as we can, watching your words. And it certainly does not have to be all done in one day or in one big giant step. Baby steps, as they say, taking one day at a time. These seem trite even to me when I say them, but sometimes those are good things to try to kind of follow. I thought that second one was interesting. I'm not really much of a history buff. I've gotten better as I've gotten older to appreciate history. But to see how people, survived the Holocaust, other pandemics, and they did survive and they thrived. To read and to hear those stories, that may be something that I need to do, frankly. And of course, there are plenty of those kinds of stories as well in the Holy Scriptures. So what can people do more specifically? And I'll end here so that we have time for discussion and questions. Certainly prayer. There's no way around it. I don't think anything good happens without folks who pray earnestly. Whatever your ministry, outreach, your work is, stay good at it, become better at it, and you may be led to branch out away from it, or maybe away is not the right word, but in a different direction than when you first thought. Be open to it, because it may be what your community needs and what is needed at the time. So. All right. Questions, concerns, worries? Remember, I only have 10 minutes to fix your worries, so don't make it anything.
Dr. Mora, thanks for sharing. This is Mike Gunnarsson from City Ministry Network. Hey, I have a question, something I've been wrestling with for a while, and it kind of comes out of my own experience and reflection. But and I heard what sparked the thought was you referred to this process. You actually said grief at one point, or loss, something to that effect. I know that when I walked through my own personal loss, I had a significant loss several years ago. Simply being in a position of denying it or trying to go back to the way things were just brought frustration and anger and didn't help me in my healing process. And it wasn't until I came to the place of saying, okay, I accept this and I can begin discovering my new normal, that I felt like I really kind of came to this place of healing. And the reason I say that is that I seem to talk to so many people who are just absolutely frustrated because they're waiting for this to go away and they can go back to normal. They can go back to the way things are. And so I guess I'm just wanting to kind of pick your brain in regards to, are we in a situation of just saying, well, this is going to be over, okay, give it a year, it's gone longer than we think, or is it more of an acceptance of things may never go back, and let's find our new pace, a new normal, a new ministry, a new way of doing things, and that we really find in acceptance, we find a path forward to the new normal. Would that be good thinking, or am I telling people just just to suck it up and get used to this? I don't want to. I want to be encouraging people, but I think just telling them to wait until it gets back to normal is really leading to the frustration and the anger and that I've seen a lot lately.
No, and I think you bring up, very good points, because I seem to remember that some people thought it would be over this year. you know, and that, I don't think that that's a helpful, you know, attitude. So, right, the question becomes, well, if it's not going to be over and no one can say when it's be over, then what do you have to offer me? Or what does any of us have to offer anybody? And the fact of it is, I mean, there will be some new way of being, if I could be so metaphysical, because, you know, life is different now. Anyone who denies that life is different, it's sort of like what you were saying, Mike, about denying grief. Well, you can deny it all you want, but it doesn't mean that it's not real. And so once you deal with the reality, you know, I mean, I might prefer, although I'm not a counselor anymore, so don't say, oh, Dr. Morris said to say this. But, you know, I would rather people say, well, what if this was going to be, what if we were going to be in purple tier for the next 9 months? You know, it's sort of a parallel question to that other big picture question that, you know, for whatever reason, because maybe I'm just this old now and older, that I see the other sort of question. What would you do if you knew that your life was going to end in 6 months, right? Those kind of big questions. Would I do anything differently? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to sit here and suggest, because I'm, you know, kind of old school in my own Christian ways, that, oh, let's just junk in-person church and have everyone do Zoom, and we'll Zoom the world, and that's how we'll spread hope. Well, that probably won't work 100% of the time. But you all know, I think, in varying ways and varying degrees, that there's had to be some virtual outreach, even if the virtual outreach is using the telephone more than you did 6 months ago. I mean, you know, that's more of an outreach. So yeah, I think the mindset, and kind of what you're saying is, you know, it's just like a lot of things. I think dealing with reality is probably better than denying it. I mean, sometimes you have to deny it because you just can't deal with it today. But eventually, it would be better to kind of face it as much as you can, accept it, you know, and change along with it. You know, and there's so many metaphors, and I'm terrible with them. But you know, it's like jumping into you know, the Stanislaus River in the middle of the winter time. It's not going 3 miles an hour; it's going 30 probably, especially if it does rain. So you either stand in the river and drown, or you figure out a way to float along with it until you can get to safety or whatever it is. But I think that's the sort of the mindset to try to get ourselves and then, you know, folks into. I'm talking too much. Other concerns, other worries?
Dr. Morrow, where do we go to, for those that we know that are really struggling? And maybe it's us, but maybe it's people we know, and where can we refer them to? Like, I know, hey, they have a health provider. Call your health provider. You know,
Right.
You know, is that, and our county offers services. You know, what's the waiting line for services? I mean, what's people that are struggling with life, even living, you know, are just down, depression, all that. What's the best advice you can give to us on how to get people the help they need?
Yeah, and in some ways it's the very practical advice, and you know, one of the, I mean, it can be a blessing, but sometimes it's not, because everyone has different resources. So it really just depends, you know. At the county, although I'm sure at one time people thought, well, there's always the county that will come and help me if nobody else can help me. We have a particular mission, as some of you may know, which is really to reach out to those who truly have no other option, and who are seriously and persistently mentally ill. Okay, that's, you know, so, you know, we have programs that can fill in some other gaps too, but that's really our primary mission. And you know, so for a lot of folks, it may be the first place to call, and we have a, you know, an 800 number that is. But when people, either have their own insurance or private insurance, or have some ability to pay, or are already connected with a healthcare provider, even one in the community. There are usually other, ways that folks can get connected to their own help if they need it. So yeah, I would still say, if you have a connection to a healthcare provider, primary care physician even, then that's a place to start, because they will have a referral network and things like that. So that's really my best advice.
Are most health providers, are they just swamped? Like, is there like a waiting that you know of? Is there any chance of getting help that you need, or is it, how long do you have to wait to get an appointment? I mean, what's it like in our area? Do you know?
What I've heard is that it really does vary. Now I just sound like every other psychiatrist in the world. It kind of depends. But I know from personal lived experience that sometimes when you call, the number on the back of your card, you can get connected pretty much right away within a day or two. And sometimes it takes a lot longer to get connected and then to figure out what the next appointment. In general, I would say that, so as I said, there's been some, delays and backups and things in folks getting, connected to somebody, connected to counseling, for example. But I think it really does depend. I can speak a little more directly about, again, the sort of the limited county experience, which over the last couple months has really been up and down. You've probably heard in other settings, but I'll say it here, at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, not just our visits, but healthcare visits in general were down. Like nobody either wanted to or could, if they were following the public health orders, leave their house except for essential things. And so for some people, essential things meant, I have a doctor's appointment. I'm not sick. I'm just not going to go. Time will tell, maybe sooner than later, if, people really should have gone to their regular doctor's appointments over a period of time just to keep up their own health, which is of course important. So, but, I think that, it's kind of coming up and down as time goes on. So.
Okay. Anyone else? We got a couple minutes left.
This is Douglas with Loving of Manteca. Question would be, maybe you could speak, given that you have faith leaders here, could you speak towards how to respond to a lot of the stigmas that exist in the church around behavioral health, and how maybe to encourage folks to be, there's trusted relationships that you as a believer that exist in your relationships, right? And sometimes church, like many other groups, folks may wear a mask. Maybe you could speak to the opportunity to be vulnerable a little more, or to kind of out yourself a little bit, or rely more on those trusted relationships more. Hopefully that's a question.
I think there was a question in there. Let me see if I could start it and make it a short answer, and then you can correct. Yeah. So I think the other piece, the piece that you're alluding to really is, you can certainly get support from people that you trust and that and now I'm really, hopefully, actually pun fully intended, preaching to the choir, that we all have, folks that we are already connected to through our churches, through our congregations, through our ministries, and that we probably should be relying on each other more. And that's a source of support and a source of both comfort, and frankly, also should be some correction if necessary. Like, are you serious? Did you really say that? Did you really do that? I mean, if it comes from our brothers and sisters, we should take it in the spirit that it should come from, which is meant to, maybe break us down a little, but to really build us up, and to, again, get set on a better path in case we're not on a good path. So I would definitely encourage, folks to reach out already within your own networks if you haven't, within your own trusted circles, because hopefully, the issue about, well, I'm not sure where this person is coming from. Hopefully, you know where they're coming from, and you'd be willing to take the potentially positive criticism along with the encouragement together, and it would allow for growth. Am I in the right direction, Douglas?
Yeah, that was, and mostly I believe, like, there's some stigma that exists in the church when it comes to addressing our mental health as believers or as society in general. And you just got to pray more. I think you'll hear that. And how we can kind of debunk some of that. We have a pulpit, and we have a place of leadership that we, potentially can speak into those.
Right.
Those. How
Right.
would you say the best way? What's a good delivery in that sense to equip leaders? And in the 3 minutes, I guess, that you have.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, so I'm gonna give you the 1 minute version, because
Yeah.
sometimes people ask me, you're a Christian and you're a psychiatrist. How does that work? Because I thought psychiatrists couldn't be. Look, we live in a fallen world, and that fall affects everything. It doesn't mean we're as bad as we could be, but it means that the fall permeates, if I may say so, almost every cell of our being. So if you want to break that down biologically, it means that I could be as faithful a Christian as I'm ever going to be. One, if I don't grow anymore, God will still love me. But two, I could still suffer from fill in the blank: depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, whatever. And maybe some of it's my own fault. I have a bad diet. I smoke too much. I watch too much social media. Oh, that's my other tip. Please get off of social media unless you're the one running it for your organization. I'm being concrete there, but less social media consumption is probably healthier for all of us, or all of us together, including myself. So that's sort of the approach, and you all will be able to say it better than I just did, because I used a blunt instrument with 1 minute left. But that's one of the places that I would go. Is we could suffer for all kinds of things, and of course some of us seem like we don't suffer from anything, but if we're all honest with ourselves, we all know it's sort of like that Mark Twain saying, we're all ignorant just about different things. Well, we all suffer just about different things. And so part of that suffering, could be related to anxiety, depression, behavioral health things. And sometimes that means you rely on your trusted things, but sometimes it means you got to go see a doctor to make sure there's not some physical thing that makes it look like it's a behavioral health thing. And then maybe it needs more of a behavioral health approach, to be able to reverse the effect of the fall. I could say that in this group because I think you understand where I'm coming from. If I said it outside of this group, even to my office 6 feet from now, I don't know that they would understand what I was talking about exactly. I have to explain it much more.
All right, you guys. Well, hey, it's right at 10 o'clock. So Dr. Mora, thank you for your time. Thank you for just sharing your heart with us. Please, can you email me that PDF of that presentation? And then I will email that out to all the people who are not on the call here. Is that okay? Yeah, and I'll stay in touch that way. And if anything comes up from Deb too, I think email might be the best way to send out information if Deb has anything to send out, any updates like that. I don't know if we'll be meeting the next month or two because of the holidays and stuff, but I will, I do have everyone's email so I can keep up to date that way. All right, you guys, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.